From all the messing around in Inscryption that I've done throughout making all of these videos, I found a few interesting ways to soft lock or freeze the game, and I thought it'd be cool to take a look at some of them. So first up is a way to break the game at the campfire event in Leshy's cabin. If you somehow go to this event with no cards that you can possibly buff the stats of, then the game just sort of freezes here when you're supposed to select a card, since there will be no options. And then there's nothing you can do except for access the pause menu or read the rulebook. Now, as far as I know, it should be impossible to pull this one off through normal gameplay, but the way I found it was from editing my save file to get specific cards in the deck. So by making a deck of nothing but the static glitch card, which doesn't have attack or health stats, that'll cause this campfire soft lock. Another very similar one is with the Goobert event in Casey's mod. There are certain cards that Goobert isn't allowed to duplicate for you, so if you somehow manage to build a deck with nothing but cards that Goobert doesn't know how to paint, then again you get a soft lock or freeze here. There will be no cards for you to choose from, and the game just won't progress. And also, again, I don't think this one is possible either through normal means. There is no failsafe for the campfire or Goobert events because there shouldn't need to be. You'd have to be editing your save file to even find these, as far as I can tell. Some of the cards that Goobert can't paint are the Ringworm, Ouroboros, the Static Glitch card again, the Ejirok, and the Long Elk for some reason. So if you somehow only had those cards, that would cause this soft lock. So while those two soft locks are kind of impossible through normal means, the rest of the ones I'm going to show in this video are actually possible to pull off without editing your save file. So still in Leshy's cabin, if you beat the Moon or the Limoncello and then somehow end up with no cards that can do damage to Leshy, then the battle will just continue on indefinitely without a winner, since you can't damage Leshy and Leshy won't summon Starvation in this scenario. In every other battle, this soft lock is prevented by the fact that Leshy will start summoning Starvation cards when you run out of cards. But during the final boss fight against the Moon or Limoncello, since all of Leshy's zones will be full, instead of summoning Starvation, Leshy just gives additional attack points to his giant card when you run out of cards. And then, if it dies, Leshy just does nothing, no Starvation. So if you take out the giant card and then sacrifice your only attackers for something with 0 attack, for example, then you can't possibly win this fight. And since Leshy won't summon Starvation, neither will he. And so the battle just goes on forever, and the only thing you can do to stop this, again, is to access the pause menu. Honestly, it's kind of eerie since you can still press the bell to end your turn, and it'll be like the battle is still going on, but nothing is happening. And Leshy stays completely silent and just stares at you the whole time, unless you have some interaction that'll make him talk, like an item or something. And again, this one is completely possible and actually pretty easy to do in normal gameplay. Something about Leshy silently staring at you during this scenario and just not summoning any cards is a bit unsettling to me. Usually, he's much more talkative than this. So that's it for Leshy's cabin, but there are also quite a few soft locks in PO3's factory that you can pull off pretty easily in normal gameplay as well. The thing about Act 3 is that all of the events where you add a card to your deck are completely optional, so you can just choose not to add any cards to your deck. Meanwhile, there are 6 total opportunities to straight up remove a card from your deck, from 3 of the overclock events and the 3 recycle events, and since you start with 4 cards in your main deck, you could just remove all of the cards from your deck with those events, and then just have no cards outside of the empty vessel side deck. And it turns out that you don't even need to get rid of all of your cards to encounter a soft lock. If you have just 1 card in your main deck and enter a battle, the game will sort of freeze after you draw that card, and then you can't play any cards or do anything really. Even though normally you would draw 1 empty vessel from your side deck and then 3 cards from your main deck at the start of every battle, this soft lock only occurs if you have 1 or 0 cards in your main deck. If you have just 2, the battle will go on just fine, even though you're supposed to draw 3. And then there are also a bunch of events in Act 3 where having 0 cards in your deck will result in a soft lock as well. The 3 that don't soft lock are the Sigil Adding event, the Gemify event, and the Beast Mode event. Each of these will just have PO3 acknowledge that you have no options for the event, and then the event just ends and the game continues as usual. But every other event where you need to have a card will freeze up if you don't. The Overclock event and the Recycle event will just freeze when you're supposed to choose a card because you'll have no options. The Trade event will first let you actually pick a card from PO3, and then when you have to choose a card to give up for it, the game will freeze there as well, as again, you have nothing to trade to him. And the Custom Card event will also do the same thing once you have to choose a card to recycle for SP to make the custom card with. So those are all of the events in Act 3 where you can softlock or freeze the game by having no cards. Of course, this can easily be fixed by just going back to the main menu, re-entering the game, and then just going to one of the card drop events and adding a card to your deck. So it's not like this would cause you to have to restart the whole game or anything like that, but it is interesting that you can do these so easily. The last thing I want to mention is not actually a soft lock, but is kind of similar, and I think it's pretty cool. So, during the unfinished boss fight, when you choose the mechanics for the 2 phases, you can pick a certain combination of rules that will cause an infinite loop to occur. For example, by choosing the rules, every time a card is played, a random card takes 5 damage, and every time a card dies, a random card is played, or something similar to that. And then as soon as you play a card, it'll take 5 damage, which in Act 3 is usually lethal, and then another card will be played, and that'll trigger the first effect again, so it'll take 5 damage, causing it to die as well, and spawn another card, and so on, infinitely, which would be a sort of soft lock, since that would prevent the game from being able to progress. It would just keep looping. Except that PO3 actually steps in if this happens, and puts an end to it after a few loops by negating one of the 2 rules. It's a pretty funny and interesting interaction, and the Fishbot card even has special dialogue during this fight, where he hints at the fact that you can do this. So those were some of the interesting soft locks and freezes that I found. Let me know what you think about them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.